Hey guys, it's Nate, and welcome to another part of my epoxy river desk build. Today we'll be diving into part 3 to explain the process of sealing and providing your project with the perfect flood coat. If you have any questions on this build, ask away in the comments. Thanks for stopping by, and I hope you enjoy the video. So there is a lot of mixing that's going to be happening in this video, and I just want to take this time to remind my viewers that whatever epoxy that you're using, be sure to read the directions thoroughly. Each manufacturer is different in how long you want to mix it for, if you need to transfer it. Bottom line, typically with any type of epoxies, whenever you're mixing them, you're going to mix it in one container, transfer it to another container before mixing it again, and then in that second container after it's been mixed again, you'll finally pour it onto your project. Since this is part 3 of the build, if you haven't got a chance to watch part 1 and part 2, highlighting my main epoxy pour, as well as the sanding that provided us with the best chance to get a good seal and flood coat, go watch them. I'll have them linked above. I also have a comprehensive prep work video that necessarily isn't part of this series, but if you are trying to find out the best way to pour and get your melamine form perfectly sealed, go check out that video as well. So to pour a seal coat, you want to make sure it's covering the slab evenly. Calculate about 1 ounce per every square foot of your project for each seal coat. Take a shower squeegee to thinly spread the tabletop epoxy in a thin but even covering. Wipe the sides of your project to give it the same thickness as your tabletop. This is a great time that if you have excess epoxy in your mixing container, dip your hand in there with your glove on and kind of smear it along the sides. And this is a great way to provide the same thickness between your actually top of your project and the sides. If an excess amount of epoxy runs off your project, don't be too concerned. With a seal coat, you're not going to get a perfect even thickness. That's what the flood coat's going to be for. So you're going to do a couple seal coats leading up to this. So if you're getting concerned that there's some imperfections and maybe some like bumpiness to your seal coat, that's fine. You're going to fix that with the final flood coat. Hit your seal coat with a heat gun till all the air bubbles pop. My advice is to do this 3 times, and in between your heat gun or your torching, wait about 5 minutes to see if any other air bubbles kind of flow to the surface, and that would allow for a optimum clarity in your seal and flood coats. Let your seal coats dry for about 24 hours before going on to apply the next seal coat. Typically, your project will require 2 to 3 seal coats before embarking on your flood coat. Before adding your first seal coat, and then every seal coat afterwards, and even leading up to the flood coat, make sure that you roughen the surface of your project with a 220 grit sandpaper prior to adding each layer. This may be concerning, as you may feel like you are ruining your project, but these scratches that you're going to see will not be seen once you add the next layer. It's actually going to help adhere the top coat that you're adding to your project surface. I personally use 2 seal coats before moving on to my flood coat. For my flood coat, I used about 4 ounces per every square foot. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications for when new content from my channel comes out. Also comment if you have any questions on the build, or if you've worked with epoxy in your past or plan to in your future. Instead of using a shower squeegee, I switched to a 1/4 inch trough that would provide an even thickness for my flood coat. Don't be afraid to mix up more epoxy if you didn't make enough. So I must have miscalculated my flood coat amount because I only had about half of what I needed when I first poured my bucket onto my project. So you can kind of see my dad and my cousin working on the project as I mixed up another batch. So if this is what you run into, don't feel like you're gonna make a big mistake because you have quite a decent amount of working time with this tabletop epoxy. So it kind of gave me enough time to mix up another thing and then still mix it all together and get the proper thickness. After you spread the flood coat with your trough, take a brush and dab the top and the edges of your table to get rid of the trough line so that you don't get a textured finished product. When using the brush, do it in a random pattern so you don't create another set of pattern lines like you did with your 1/4 inch trough in your project. I would also suggest to keep either a pick or a pair of tweezers on hand just in case a bristle or something else like a piece of dust, a big piece of dust falls onto your top. You don't have to be kind of like fishing it out with your glove and making a big indent. You can just take a fine tweezer or pick and kind of pick it out like that. Repeat the same steps with the torch/heat gun as I said for the seal coat. You want to do this about 3 times and give 5 to 10 minute interval between each time to let more air bubbles that could be potentially trapped in the surface rise to the top, so it makes it easy to pop them. Some people have very good results with using a torch to get rid of the bubbles. I found that when I did my first pass with the torch, it didn't really give the clarity that I was used to seeing with my heat gun. So after the first pass that I did it with a torch, I switched back to my heat gun. I felt like I had better control that way, so that's why I only used the heat gun after that, and I didn't go back to using the torch. Let the flood coat sit for at least a day before moving it, and know that even after a day, and this goes to whatever epoxy that you're using, you shouldn't really be doing any heavy manipulation of the epoxy, whether that be cutting it, routing it, like giving it a bevel or anything for at least 3 to 5 days. And a lot of epoxies don't actually fully cure until 30 days. So it's on a lot of the labels that you shouldn't actually do anything super strenuous to the epoxy for at least 30 days when it actually is fully cured. So after my main slab was finished, I switched over and did 1 seal coat, and then I just did a flood coat on the backsplash piece. I didn't feel like I needed to do 2 full seal coats on the backsplash piece. I didn't really have that much epoxy left, but it also covered the backsplash piece a lot easier than the actual main slab piece. So after I did 1 seal coat, I already had a pretty good desired finish, so I just added another pseudo flood, kind of like a hybrid between a flood and a seal coat, just a little bit excess, and that provided me with a really good clarity on the backsplash piece. I also only have footage from the flood coat, so unlike in the big slab where you can actually see it from like the natural wood to giving the epoxy, the first time that you see the backsplash piece, I've already actually done a seal coat, so the footage that you have here is from my pseudo flood seal coat. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much. If you could do me a huge favor and help the YouTube algorithm by liking, subscribing, and ringing the bell for notifications on my channel, that would be awesome. So thanks again guys for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.